Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Veil and the Thread podcast. We are mother and daughter team. I'm Sarah, the daughter.
And I'm Elizabeth, the mother.
So, thank you for joining us again today. Um, Mum, how are you feeling? You're suffering with your allergies a little bit today, eh?
Yeah, we've got the orange grove has just been harvested. So there's no oranges but lots of blossom. Smells beautiful, but it's not good for my allergies.
Yeah. So,
So I'm a bit
so
sniffly.
we'll have to excuse you as you sniffle your way through this
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, I do apologise, people.
Um, okay, well, I think maybe you'll have a little bit of an easier podcast today anyway, because I think we're going to be talking about tarot today. So I think I'll be doing the majority of talking. I know that you had some questions that you wanted to cover. Um, I mean, basically in the previous podcast we were talking about different tools, and obviously one of the major tools that is used within our community is tarot. So we thought we'd kind of do a bit of a deeper dive of that today. Not, we always say we're never really coming towards these subjects as any kind of authority. This is more, a casual conversation about our experiences and the tools that we use and how we use them. So please don't think that this is going to be any kind of tutorial or tuition on tarot. It's going to be more of a casual discussion. But did you want to kick it off, Mum? Do you have some questions that you want to
Yeah.
go over?
Well, yeah, because I've not had the best attitude towards tarot in the past. Just because I have a lazy streak, really. And I thought it seems like a lot of work. And, I did study tarot for a while. I managed to get a meager qualification in it, but I can't say I really fully understood or appreciated it as a tool. So, yeah, so really, I'm curious about how people use tarot and the different ways that people use them because I hear mediums who do use tarot talk about how they only use them for a start, a middle, and an end. They're not actually using the tarot card um, as they were intended to be used, and that's probably where I fall in,
Mm,
to that.
yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things you've said there is about how you feel as though you've not really got fully into tarot because you're lazy, and you tend to we've had this discussion many times before because you see it as you being lazy and not learning the cards, whereas for for me, I see that your strengths are in communicating with spirit. And so I understand where you're coming from, where you say, "Oh, I'm lazy. I kind of default to what my strength is." Um, but pick different perspectives on this because for me, I think, wow, you can communicate with spirit in such a strong way that you don't actually need these cards to do whatever you're doing or deliver a message to somebody because you're getting that information directly from spirit, and you're always very accurate, and your information, your evidence is always very strong. So for me, I've always kind of thought, well, you don't actually need to use them. I use tarot cards and oracle cards because I struggle to connect with spirit in the same way that you do. So I guess for me, I see what I do as the lazy option because I use cards and oracle rather than maybe I should spend more time trying to strengthen the connection with spirit. Do you know what I mean? It's
Mm,
it's all
I do know what you
perspective.
mean. I think that it's just coming from different ends, I suppose, because as you say, um, I might go direct to spirit But if I learnt to use tarot fully in the different ways it could be used, I could probably get far more information and detail
Hmm.
than I perhaps do. Whereas you're coming from it from the other end, where you've developed a strong um, link with tarot, because I think you and tarot get on really well. You seem to be able to gel with that tool. But you also connect with spirit. But I don't think you fully appreciate that that's what you're doing.
Mm. Yeah.
So I think it's leading you into working with the spirit world just from a different angle.
Yeah, I can understand that. And okay, so then let's have, because I know that you had a few things that you wanted to ask, and let's see if we can, because I do agree that you haven't always had the healthiest respect for the cards. So
I
let's
know.
see if
Yeah.
through our questions today, if we can change the perception or, give you something a little bit more to think about when you're thinking about the cards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for example, and like I said, I know people use them in different ways, which I don't fully, um, I haven't developed. But do you use them in a traditional way, or like a symbolic way, or intuitive way, or do you just merge all three, really?
So So the way I started with cards, I guess my journey has been quite interesting and it's gone from one place to and then it's morphed into something different and then it's morphed into something different again. And basically I um started with the cards in a very logical way because that's how I'm wired. I'm very logical and very analytical,
Yeah.
and I need things to
Yep.
make sense. I like spreadsheets, I like tables, I like things to be placed in a certain way and for all of those links to mean something. So,
Yep.
of course, the very first step for me was trying to learn the meaning of each individual card in its entirety. And that's crazy. There's, over 70 cards in the deck, and each one has a very individual meaning. And so I struggled with that format. I struggled with that process. It's not something that I've completely given up because I do like the traditional meanings of the card, and to be honest, when I do a read, the traditional meaning is always the first thing that comes to mind.
Uh-huh.
However, as I've been working more with oracle cards obviously, some of them will have a description of what the card means. Some of them are just pictures, and you've got a whole variation of everything in between those two ends of the spectrum. And so with the oracle cards, I think there's a need to work much more intuitively. You have to be able to pick out things from the card or, you know, feel things rather than just reading a description. And so I think as I worked more with the oracle cards, that intuitive process started to seep more into how I read the tarot cards. And so I will look at the traditional meaning and how the read fits together with that, but then I'll also look at things that are jumping out at me from the card, or I'll um, pick up on an intuitive theme or feeling that I'm getting around the cards. So, yeah, I guess that was a really long-winded way of saying I do kind of combine multiple techniques when I'm doing a read. Um, and there's that, but that's just one way of doing it. There's so many when it comes to tarot.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm also thinking as well because I know a lot of people I watch when they do tarot cards, they may do the spread for the person they're reading for,
Yeah.
or they may ask the person to put their energies on the card,
Hmm.
and then they'll take the cards from that person and read them. So they're starting off reading the person's energy and then maybe go on to other things. But I noticed that you do a lot of remote readings as well. So you've never got to meet that person.
Mm.
So I'm thinking you must be, at the end of the day, tuning into that universal energy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, look, I mean, as you said, some readers will get people to pick the cards themselves. Some readers will pick the cards for the is it querent, the person that they're reading for.
Uh-huh.
I am one
Uh-huh.
of those people who, to be honest, either way we do it, the cards are always spot on. They're so accurate. If I was doing a reading for you, I could get you to shuffle the cards and pick your own cards. I could shuffle them with the intention
Mm.
of picking the cards for you, and pick the cards and still get just as accurate a reading. And I actually prefer working that way. Maybe it's the control. The control freak side of me that likes to do the cards, but I find that's just the process that I work with, and perhaps it is because I do so much remote work that I'm used to connecting with somebody's energy as a surrogate and working that way rather than working face to face with somebody or getting them to physically do something. I'm so used to doing remote healing, remote emotion codes, remote tarot readings that it's just second nature for me now I go through a whole process like we've spoken about before, that protection or self-occupation.
Mhm.
I go through
Mhm.
asking the permissions of working not only with my higher self, but the higher self of the person that I'm reading for. And
Yeah.
the energy and spirits that are there to help us work in our highest good. And when I go through that process, I find that the link that I have with that person's energy is just as strong, if not stronger, than when I'm working with somebody physically, face to face, because there can be there can be not resistance, but there can sometimes be nervousness or doubt, or, from either the person that's reading or the person that's being read for. And sometimes that energy can interfere with the read. So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense because you just made me think about something as well now. If you're doing remote readings for people who, well, you don't get to meet them and you don't get to see them, but from their perspective, that might help them to be more open in that they don't put up barriers
mm,
to your reading out of fear that you're going to pick up something that they don't want you to pick up.
yeah,
So, maybe they feel more confident about this is a complete stranger who's doing this reading for me. So, you know what? I don't really care if she picks something up
yeah, yeah.
that I might otherwise want to keep quiet
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I was face to face
I
with
think the
her.
sense of anonymity definitely does help. I think particularly nowadays as well. I don't know. I mean, people might completely disagree with this, but I think particularly for younger generations as well, um, they're so used to, and I'm including me in this because you know that I have my own social anxiety issues. I'm much more comfortable when I don't have to deal with somebody's energy directly. Um,
Mm,
and that's,
mm,
so working remotely is also a protection for me because depending on who I'm working with, if they've got a particularly strong energy or a particularly skeptical energy, or, I mean, you know what it's like in this community, you'll get people coming
mm-hmm.
for reads that are there to test you, or
Yeah,
to be like, oh well,
yeah.
I'm gonna keep this information back, or I'm gonna give incorrect information to see if you can actually,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that energy for somebody like me and a lot of people that are working in this field, it can kind of mess with our energy a little bit. So
Yeah.
doing a remote reading kind of protects me from any potential, empath issues that pop up and
Yes.
stuff like that. And
Yes.
I think that that then enables me to give a stronger read, make a stronger connection, because I'm only sat here worrying about, you know, I say worrying, I don't mean worrying. I'm the only thing I have to be concerned about is sitting here and connecting with that energy. I don't have to navigate all of the human behaviors around that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, but that's just
Yeah.
how I
So,
work.
yeah. But now it's making me think that in some ways, because I've always had a thing about, oh, I don't really like doing things remotely. I don't like online courses, for example,
Mhm.
stuff like that. But in this respect, I could see that there's more advantages
Mm.
than disadvantages to doing remote work.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't work for everybody, right? You get those
Mm.
mediums or readers that are like, I need to have that physical link, I need to have that closeness. Um, but for me, I find because particularly because I kind of like when I'm working, I like to be in the quiet, I like to be centered, I like to be focused. And I can do that much more effectively and strongly when I'm on my own.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that well, a lot of the time, there isn't anybody sat at the other end while you do the read. You'll do a reading for somebody, and they could be, I don't know, they could be at work at that time or doing something else.
Mm.
You don't have to read for them in the moment,
Yeah.
that they're there. So again, maybe that adds to the reading because you're not having to factor in what's going on for them right now. They may, if you go for a face to face reading, for example,
Mm.
and somebody comes to you or you go to them, there's all the difficult energies that they're bringing in,
Mm.
not intentionally, but, they might have had a rough day at work or problems at home or other issues that can add layers
Yeah,
of different energy.
and that,
So if,
sorry, I was going to say just that actually
yeah,
makes me think as well about yeah, like they can have a reading and not be aware of exactly when it's going on. So it's like there's no
yeah.
resistance. It's like that what do they call it? White coat syndrome. Like when you go
Oh,
when you
yeah.
go to the doctors for your blood pressure taking and you know that it's gonna happen. So it's like immediately your blood pressure raises. And I think it's the
Yeah.
same if you're in a situation that can be anxious. Um, or you're not quite sure what to expect, there can be those subtle changes in your energy that make you a little bit more guarded than you would be if you didn't know that, exactly when the read was happening. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's probably more opportunity to be more honest as well. Just as an aside, really, this isn't to do with tarot, but I remember you did an emotion code healing for someone, and you were able to highlight for that person that they had a tendency towards jealousy.
Mm,
And that person shared that information with me later and said that she'd always hidden that trait from everybody, really, because she felt embarrassed that she carried this trait.
mm,
And she was pleased in a way that it had come to light through the emotion code healing that you did, because as well you enabled her to realize it wasn't something that she was guilty of. It was some trapped energy,
mm.
and she was able to start acknowledging it. That's what she said. She could start to acknowledge it to other people rather than hiding it in shame, that
Yeah, it's
she felt
I mean,
this.
look, we're kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent just
Mm.
temporarily, but the emotion code is a fantastic system. I will mention at this point, obviously, the emotion code is a trademark system. It was created by a guy called Dr. Bradley Nelson. So anybody that isn't aware of the emotion code, I'll put the link to his site in the description so you can kind of look up that. But it's a fantastic system because it's one of those things where, when you go through normal therapies, talk therapies, sometimes there's a need for you to know what the issue is. Um, to be able to target that and properly get to the root of it. With the emotion code, you don't have to have any idea of what the underlying emotion is. In fact, in the majority of cases, people are not even aware that what they're dealing with actually might have its root cause in trapped emotions. Um, so it's I guess linking back to what we were saying about tarot and having a reading when you don't necessarily know exactly when it's going to be done. You know it's going to be done at some point, but you're just
Mm.
going about your daily
Mm.
business. It's kind of the same thing where we're tapping into the energy of the higher self, of the subconscious, of things that you're not necessarily aware of. And the less resistance that there is to be able to connect to that energy, the better. And that's what's good about the emotion code, that it's kind of working beneath any conscious awareness of
Mm.
what's going on. Um, yeah, the same as it is with tarot.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you've been working with tarot now for quite a few years, and do you see that a change in how you work to how you worked right at the beginning? As a, as I suppose your confidence has grown in using that tool.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it basically comes back to, how do you read the card? Are you sticking to the traditional interpretation, or are you being a little bit more relaxed about that and working intuitively and working around the edges? Um, and so I think the more you work with it, it's almost like you feel more of a permission to pick up messages and pick up things that you might not necessarily connect to being the traditional meaning of that card, but for whatever reason the message is jumping out to you in that moment, for that particular person. So I think confidence around believing what you're seeing is a big thing. But then, as I said, for me, I'm very logical, I'm very analytical. So at the same time as working with the cards intuitively, I am constantly studying, I'm constantly reading um, about the different information that we can get from the cards that is, uh, I say slightly less intuitive, and by that I mean I don't have to intuitively decipher the information in that moment. The intuition has come from
Mm.
somewhere, it's, from centuries ago, it's come from
Mm.
other people. But when you actually start looking at the deeper layers of tarot and you look at things like its links to numerology to begin with, every card has a number. So
Mm.
numerology is a big underpinning part of tarot, as is correspondences with the elements. It has a
Yeah,
very strong
yeah.
link to Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, as some people
All
say,
right.
which is the,
Uh-huh.
the mystical esoteric beliefs of the Jewish faith. And so the tree of life, the tarot, major arcana, minor arcana, everything fits onto the tree of life. Um,
All right.
and which
And
then gives each card a whole range of other information that you would get not from the little textbook that comes with your tarot cards, completely separate. And then there's also the archetypal theories, from Carl Jung about the different archetypes, and that comes in. I
Mm.
feel like I'm forgetting something major,
What?
but there's so
Uh,
many different.
I know you've talked. Yeah, you talked a lot before about astrology as well.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, astrology was the other big one, and obviously the planets, the
Yeah.
zodiacs, and how they're all connected to the cards. So for each and every single card in that deck, I could look at it from a numerology perspective, an
Mm,
astrological perspective, a kabbalistic perspective, an archetypal perspective, um,
mhm.
traditional explanation perspective. That's before I've even put any of my intuitive stuff on top of that. Uh,
Yeah.
color, color as well. The different colors in the card and the symbolism within the card of, there's little lizards or pomegranates or whatever. They all
Mm,
mean something. They
yeah.
all mean something. And this is why I love tarot so much, because it's it's used by mediums, some mediums, in a way where it's super, super like on the surface. And that's absolutely
Yeah.
fine.
Like me.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine because that's the way that they use it. So I know a lot of mediums who, like you, they have a very strong connection with spirit. But if they're struggling to make a connection with somebody or they're not getting information through,
Mhm. Mhm.
they might start their read with a tarot card.
Yeah.
They'll have a look at it and they, they might get a whole bunch of information from that helps them start their read. They might get absolutely jack from that card
Yeah.
and interpret it in a in a super random kind of way. So you get people using it that way, and then you'll get people who look at the card and immediately know this card is linked to this planet, it's this number, it's this color, it's this
Mhm.
archetype, it's, in the tree of life, it's this Hebrew letter, and that means this, that, and the other, and then there's the whole story of how the tarot fits together in a story and in a journey, and the Fool card is the first card of the major arcana. There's a reason that the Fool is not number one and that the Fool is the zero, because
Yeah.
the Fool is
Yeah.
not actually a card per se. The Fool is the character that is making his way through the journey of the cards,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
huge, huge arena.
Yeah. Now, the more you explain tarot to me, I kind of think, yeah, that's why I don't use it because I'm not like you. I don't have your analytical mind, and I've seen when you work, before you do a reading, and just the amount of work that you put into everything related to tarot, and I think that kind of justifies me saying that I'm lazy. Maybe it's just I can't work
Yeah,
in
you
that
can't work that
way.
way. And you look at what I do and you go, oh my God, like, look at all the information you're going into, and this is such hard work. Whereas I look at it and I go, oh my God, look at this read. This is so interesting. Like, this is come out with this card and this has come out with that card, and how incredible is that, So for but this, I think this comes back to what we said at the beginning. I don't have a strong connection, a strong enough connection right now to be able to work with spirit and say, give me whatever message this person in front of me needs. Um,
Yeah.
you do. So arguably, does tarot even need to be a part of how you work and what you do? You know,
Yeah, I think, well, I think perhaps it would be useful to have more knowledge than I do because I think it might add to whatever I'm picking up. I think it could add more meat to the bones, if you like.
I
But
yeah,
what?
I think the the more I read about tarot and the further down the rabbit hole I go with it, I'm more and more amazed by it, and I just think, wow, like how how are we not taught as children to use this for guidance for everything?
Yeah.
Because when you look at the correspondences, when I say correspondences, I mean numerology, astrology, Kabbalah. When you look at the correspondences, you can go into such minute detail, which I think sometimes
Yeah.
people might it might be a turn off for them because I don't, I don't need to get into that level of detail. You don't have to, and that's the beauty with tarot. It can be used right from that, you know, beginning point of, oh, I'm going to pick out a card because I'm not connecting very strongly right now and just see what happens, right through to uh, I don't like super accurate readings,
Mm.
for
Mm.
individuals. And I'll give you a quick example of how amazing these cards are. One night I was doing a reading for myself and I was asking a question. And I tend to do a lot of three card spreads. So I did a three card spread and I was like, I just can't make sense of these cards. Like they just don't feel right. They don't feel like you. Everybody has this, right? They always say when you pick your
Mm.
tarot
Yeah. Yeah.
cards, you can't just put them back if you don't like them. There's a message
Yeah.
in them,
Yeah.
and I don't think I fully appreciated that at the time. I was like, oh, I'm tired. I'm going to try this again tomorrow. No word of a lie. I did the reading the next day. The exact same three cards came out in the exact same order.
Oh,
And that
wow.
has happened to me maybe twice, you know, where
Yeah.
I've been like, no, this is not right. I'm not reading these cards. And then it's like the universe is like, no, we've told you what the message is.
Yeah.
You just need to interpret it. But I couldn't believe it. The exact same three cards in the exact same order, you know.
Yeah. 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 Now, yeah, because I know I used to do that for myself. I pick some cards and I think, well, that one seems to be a really good card. Then it goes downhill from there.
Yeah.
I don't like these cards. I'm going to pick some more.
Yeah, exactly. And really, all it
Yeah.
is probably just a little bit of, you're interpreting the card in a certain way. But as I said, you might be aware of two or three interpretations of that card, but actually there's probably 50. And then when you look at
Yeah.
how they come out with other cards and the relationship between that card and the other cards, then there's a whole load of other interpretations from that too. Um, and you know that they don't actually know where the tarot came from,
Yeah. I
which
know.
amazes me. I mean, I think there's records of it. I think the first records maybe mid 15th century or something like that in France, because I know one of the original decks is like the Marseille deck or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's as far back as they can trace it, but they actually don't know where the tarot came from.
I bet it goes back way further than
No,
that
it will.
because quite often things things that turn up in, like the Middle Ages in the Western world have often got the roots way back somewhere in the Middle East even,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh yeah.
So that wouldn't surprise me. Now, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Are you somebody who will read a card if it's upside down? Or are you like me where I don't like upside down cards? Not that I'm a great authority on tarot, but I just think there must be another card in that deck that can represent what the upside down card is representing without it being upside down.
Yeah, you know what? It's an interesting question because I think when you first get into tarot, you want to read reverse cards because you're like, oh yeah, that there's this whole other meaning to the cards if they come up upside down, and quite often they'll say generally if a card comes is reverse, it's the opposite of its upright meaning, very generically speaking, because you can get into a lot more detail than that. But you know what? I started um playing around with reverse meanings when I first started doing tarot, and then I quickly fell into actually, you know what, I'm going to leave the reverses out right now and just read upright. Um, More for for learning reasons, really, so that I could really get
Mm.
to learn the tarot in its normal meaning without before I started worrying about the reverse meanings. So to this very day, I still don't really read reverse cards, but I'm not saying that that's not something that I'd like to do in the future. Um,
Mm. Mm.
because right now, if I do a read and I'm interpreting the cards together, while tarot is never, people always have that thing, don't they, about the tower card or the death card. Oh, they're bad cards and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And it's like, well, every card has its light and every card has its shadow. And the death and the tower cards are extremely powerful cards for transformation and new beginnings and purging out the old. Um, and so when I read cards together now, I tend to try and look at what the general message is because some of those messages will be very positive, and then there'll be other messages that are about potential challenges or warnings of
Mm.
things to look out for. The tarot will never kind of predict death and stuff like that. It's just
Mm-hmm.
looking at the potentials of what could be and the potentials of
Yeah.
speed bumps coming up that you might want to try and navigate. So that's how I interpret them right now. um but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to include reverses in the future because I think that opens up a whole new layer of interpretation. The way I do it right now, if I just give a quick example, because I'm blabbing on a little bit. If I look at a card like the Six of Pentacles, the Six of Pentacles is the card of giving, of charity, of sharing resources, of material balance. When I see the Six of Pentacles, it very rarely gives me the positive energy of
I
balanced
know.
giving
I know.
and charity.
Yeah.
I hate, and in all fairness, I am talking about like the Rider Waite deck here because
Yeah.
I'm very much influenced by the images. So if I was using another deck on a regular basis, perhaps that might change my opinion. But the Six of Pentacles, I just find, it's a guy that's like dropping some coins to the peasants on the street and the castles in the background. And for me, it just gives that feeling of I'm going to give you some crumbs and give you, enough to make you feel happy, enough to make you feel like I'm being generous. But look at the big old castle that I've just come from. So
Yeah.
it's weird, but like that is what the Six of Pentacles can be in reverse. It can be uh, an imbalance in sharing. It can be stinginess. It can be handing out crumbs in its reverse.
Mm.
But for
Yeah.
me, the Six of Pentacles comes out, and I very rarely get the energy of the upright version of it. Even though it's sitting upright, I often feel the
Yeah.
energy of it being in reverse. So.
Yeah. That's interesting. So I suppose as well, that taps into perhaps something you strongly feel about a particular card.
Mm,
So that, in a sense, that card would probably never come out as a positive for you in a reading,
mm.
for lots of different reasons. So,
Yeah, exactly. Same
yeah,
with the Hierophant. Like I
yeah,
can never look at the Hierophant card in a positive light unless it came out with other cards that was making me strongly feel that way because the Hierophant was one of the major arcana cards and it's institution, it's doing things in a traditional way, working within the
hmm,
lines, doing things as people expect you to do. Um, I
yeah.
guess
I can see.
I guess I just explained it all from a negative perspective anyway. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but that's always my interpretation of it because, those of you that know me know that I
Yeah.
have an issue. Well, no, I've been told I have a problem with authority, and I always say no, I have a problem with incompetence. So, that's two different things. But for me, whenever I see the Hierophant, it just gives me that kind of stifled energy of, you know, the dark side of the church, or the dark side of religious
Yeah.
organizations or government organizations. It's kind of that
Uh-huh.
oppression. So I never see the Hierophant card in a positive light.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose because the tarot works so well with you as well, maybe certain cards like that
Mm.
come out because they know this is how you see that
I
card.
think so, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I
yeah,
do believe that. I was thinking about that just yesterday when I was doing a read, and I was like, oh, geez, I've got the Six of Pentacles again. And I'm like, this card always feels to me and it was a prediction read, right? So I was like, this card
uh-huh,
always feels to me that it's like this stingy handing down of something. And I was like, I'd realised then that I always get the Six of Pentacles when we're looking at situations that have that theme, have that financial stinginess theme. And I think I thought to myself yesterday, oh, the tarot keeps giving me the Six of Pentacles for this particular reason, because it
yeah,
knows that that's what my interpretation of it is. So whereas in a read, if there was another reader and they were getting a message of financial stinginess, they might get something like the Four of Cups, hoarding, holding on to something too
yeah,
tight. But I always get the Four of Pentacles, I think I said cups, the Four of Pentacles. I always get the Six of Pentacles, and I think that's just
yeah,
because the universe has learned that's my symbol.
yeah,
Similar with symbols, right? When you're working with spirit, if you see a rabbit in your mind, that image of a rabbit to you is going to mean something different to somebody else seeing a rabbit. It's the
yeah,
symbology.
yeah. So really, what we seem to be acknowledging then that with tarot, it's not just you working with tarot, it's the tarot seriously working with you.
Mm,
You know, as well. It's like the tarot has its own energy, which I do believe it must have its own energy.
mm,
And so it learns from the person that is using it as a tool. This is what this is the personality of this person.
mm,
And I know now which cards to work with her for certain themes,
mm.
you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I strongly believe that. I think we've talked about stuff like this before, but not quite on the same subject matter. Where you have, I guess it's the same thing as when talking about churches again, or any place of worship, for example, and they say,
Mm,
don't they, that the energy is so strong in those places because you have the
yeah,
repetition of people coming together in the same place for the same purpose. So that might
yeah.
be, singing hymns or singing gospel or praying, and all of that energy
Hmm.
gathers and strengthens over time. Well, if you look at tarot the same way, tarot is a system that has been used, as we know, since at least the mid 15th century. So it's a
Yeah,
system that has hundreds of years of collective energy building this system, developing this system. It grows, it morphs, it develops into something, different. Um, and that energy is there to be tapped into and to
yeah,
work with as, you know, in whatever way you need to as an individual, as
yeah,
long as you have
yeah.
respect
So,
for it.
yes, that's true. And don't keep, if you're doing a reading for yourself and you don't get what you want the first time, don't keep going at
Yeah,
it.
because you'll get the
Or
same
the other
cards
thing
again.
is as well, yeah. I mean, how do you feel about, I know like often people will pick a card for the day, but then you hear of people that will do themselves a tarot reading. Um, and it's just constant almost. Like, say they want to know what's going to come out for them for the next 6 months, and so they'll do a reading, but then in a week's time, they might do another reading and just carry on and carry on.
Mm.
Almost, I suppose, I'm wondering whether people can get too um, attached to tarot and rely on it constantly
Mm. Yeah.
rather than using their own other abilities.
Yeah.
Can it become an addiction,
I
do you
think so.
think?
I think with anything, it's that whole subject, isn't it, about humans looking at something outside of themselves to put their faith and their power into. And the same can be said of tarot, really. You're subletting your power to another system when really everything you need, every answer you need is within yourself. We're just not very good at tapping into that um, ourselves. And I think it can also be used in culmination as well. So, as I said, when I do a read, I connect with my higher self. So the intuition that is coming from those cards is coming from a collaboration between my higher self and the cards. And I actually saw something. It was in a TV program, just like some, normal kind of weekly uh, pop show or something like that. But one of the characters in it is very into esoteric spiritual things. And she said something in the story, and it really made me think. She said she believes that tarot is so accurate because it's your future self giving you messages in the present time. So, giving you messages from the future. And I thought, I've never looked at it that way, but I actually really like that. It's like a future version of yourself saying, because we know as well, right, that like nothing is set. So I could get a reading saying, oh, in the next 3 months, the outcome of X, Y, and Z is going to be this if you continue on this path. But then everything I do between today and that 3 month mark is going to affect where I end up. So it makes so much sense to me that it's your higher self saying, you're asking this question about if you do this, what will be the outcome? I've experienced that already because I'm your future self, and I'm telling you, if you continue on this path, this is the outcome.
Sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze down the microphone. You've really got me thinking there. When you talk about connecting with the higher self, who has got your best interests at heart, can we assume then that that way of working with tarot may be much safer and more accurate than maybe going direct to the spirit world, particularly if you don't know that you're connecting with the right people? Are you really connecting with your guides, people who've got your best interests at heart from the other side? What do you think?
Yeah. But again, it comes to intention, right? Because, like I said before, I do a read, my intention is that I'm connecting with my higher self and the universal energy if it's just for me. If I'm reading for somebody else, my higher self, the universal energy, and the higher self of that person, because our higher selves should always have the intention of the highest good for us, right? So, but I mean, you can look at the darker side of anything, and I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about this over the past couple of weeks. As you know, I've been reading a book about the Thoth, 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 Thoth tarot, um, which is the system that Aleister Crowley used and developed, and we we kind of was having back and forth text messages, about Aleister Crowley, and because he is one of those characters that he is connected to dark things, to magic with a K. Um, Sexual magic was a big part of a lot of the things that he did, and as we know, no matter our opinion of his esoteric work, we know that Aleister Crowley was not a particularly nice guy. Um, and he was a womanizer. He was, I mean, he was probably a narcissist. Oh, sorry, that's my alarm. He was probably a narcissist. I've not really delved too much into Aleister Crowley as an individual. Um, but when you look at his system, there's a lot of argument and there's a lot of debate about it because the tarot is considered a very safe tool to use. Did Aleister Crowley always use it in the safest way? We don't really know. We weren't there. You have to be a fly on the wall, but we know that he had a lot of connections to this dark energy, and any tool can be used for any purpose. So if you use the tarot with the intention of connecting with something that's not in the highest good, that's something dark, that's going to be reflected in the readings. Um, but yeah, when you compare it to other things like the Ouija board and spirit boxes and stuff like that, I think there's a lot more safety around the use of tarot than there is with other tools.
The more you talk with such passion about how you can work with tarot, the more I think I don't have the aptitude for it.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree on this because I think you do have the capability. I don't think you have the interest in it, which is absolutely fine because tarot is not for everybody. Um, I think I think one of the things that you should do is, get your crystal ball out again. How many years have you had a crystal ball and kind of not really put the energy into that? Um, that's something that I could, that I wish you'd kind of get back into. And perhaps, you know, the oracle cards, because I've seen you told me a story the other day, and I didn't even need to wait for you to say the last thing before I knew what you were going to say because I've watched you do this so many times. You pick an oracle, somebody picks an oracle card and they give it to you for you to read for them, and then you go into this message, which is amazing, accurate, strong evidence. You didn't look at that card once, you know? Like you, if you put that card back in the pack and I said to you, what card did you just have? You wouldn't have had any idea because you immediately make that connection, which is fine, But I think that's where the lazy bit comes in. I think you could probably spend a little bit more time actually looking at oracle cards because I think for you, all it can do is add extra layers of depth to what you're already providing.
I could try working with Oracle cards because they might give me some daily guidance and intention setting, which I need.
Well, it's been interesting that we've been talking about tarot today, actually, because just to let the listeners know that our sister channel, the Veil and the Thread Tarot, is launching hopefully on Sunday with our first tarot read. And on that channel, we're going to have different videos. We're going to have a weekly tarot read, which it's not a prediction video per se, but it's kind of looking at what energy is lying beneath the surface for the planet, um, week to week. Um, and then we're going to have some insight videos, which is basically, I do an explanation of this in the video, so I'll try not to bore people too much. But as somebody that works with energetic systems like the emotion code, Reiki healing, tarot, but also more physical types of therapies like core therapy and tweener massage and Tibetan head massage and stuff like that, when you're seeing people, you're seeing clients, and you're talking to people day to day, it's amazing how many times similar themes are coming up in people's lives at the same time. You see these threads of things that are happening, and it's weird. It's like this synchronicity of people experiencing very similar energies at the same time. And so the insight videos that I'm going to be posting are basically what themes have been coming up that week and what is the intuitive energy around that. And then on Fridays we're hoping to kind of regularly upload releases emotion code releases for whatever energy has come up in those earlier videos. So to give you a little bit of an insight as to what's coming up next week, we were talking this week about the energy of life is tough. I think there's a lot of people for a long time that have been resonating with this life is tough energy. Tougher, tougher than usual, tougher than normal. And so that's what we were speaking about in the video that's going to be going up next week. And um, we will then also be posting an emotion code release. We're going to try and identify some of the trapped emotions that might be sitting under that life is tough energy and releasing them for the collective. So we've got some exciting stuff coming up on that channel.
You talk about life being really tough these days, and I agree. I mean, don't get me wrong, growing up in the 50s and 60s was tough for most families I knew. I mean, both parents had to work to make a living and pay the bills. I mean, even the kids had to pull their weight in many households. However, everyone was working towards a better life that was in
Mm,
sight. It was like down the road, but in reach. There was a light at the end of the tunnel and we could all see it. I don't think that is true for
yeah,
your generation and the generations that have come
yeah.
after you.
Well, that's it. And I don't think so. I mean, I was going to say the energy is different now, right? I was going to say there's more of a emotional and mental kind of life is tough energy than perhaps there was when you were younger. But then I'm thinking about that and I'm thinking that might not necessarily be true. You guys were still coming out of that post-war era. Um, your parents' generation, obviously granddad was an exception to this, but you know, your parents' generation was kind of that harder, a little bit colder. I don't want to generalize because obviously everybody wasn't like that, but that little bit more emotionally detached than parents tend to be nowadays. So I think you guys did have a lot of mental and emotional hardship. I think the difference is nowadays, and you kind of hit the nail on the head, there's also a feeling of hopeless now because back when you were a kid, like you said, it was tough. You worked hard, you worked long hours. But whatever you were doing, it was contributing to a better future. I feel as though that better future is what's being taken away from people now. And so it's like we're going through the same physical, emotional, and mental hardship. We just don't have the light at the end of the tunnel to be working towards now. So it's yeah, there's a lot going on. So yeah, tune in to the Veil and the Thread Tarot on YouTube. And while I'm doing a little bit of shameless plugging right now, I will just remind our listeners as well, that the podcast is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as being uploaded to YouTube whenever we release a podcast too. So there's no excuse to not catch our insightful conversations.
I was wondering about something you said earlier about using symbols in tarot, and it got me thinking about another potential podcast, one based on the way in which spirit and the universe use symbols to communicate with us. Like, I had a conversation last week with a woman who told me that she keeps getting messages from mediums telling her that she needs to develop her mediumship, but she didn't know where to start because she said she didn't really get any messages to pass on to other people. So I told her to come to the next development circle, which she did, and I showed her a list of symbols that spirit often use that can be picked up quickly by beginners. I told her to focus on three symbols for me, which she did, and I was able to tell her how relevant they were to me, and that gave her a real boost of confidence. And often, this is how we
Yeah,
begin to work with the spirit world with
yeah.
symbols.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that because I think we can also talk then about well, I have my dice, as you know, that I use regularly with my different symbols on. So I'll bring along my dice and we can maybe do a little bit of impromptu reading where maybe you pick up some symbols from a spiritualistic perspective and I pick some symbols from my dice, which would be working on the more psychic level. But yeah, perhaps it'll also give us the opportunity to have a little bit of a chat of this thing that we always butt heads on about why can't spirit just talk to me in normal English? You know, like I'm always asking you. I want to speak to spirit. Why do they keep throwing me symbols? Why don't they just give me a sentence that I can understand? Because that's all kind of tied in at the same thing, right? So, yeah.
Yes, but remember, spirit beings don't have a physical voice box, so you have to appreciate how hard it is for them to communicate in audible words. I mean, just shouting out your name is a huge achievement for them.
Well, it's the number one question, right, for new mediums. Like, why do I have to decipher all this code? Why can't I just have a conversation? So I think that's quite a common question. So yeah, I think that'd be a good subject for the next one. So yeah, well, thank you as always for our interesting conversation today. It's always good to get the two different insights on things. And thank you as always to our listeners. As we always say, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Hopefully, this conversation kind of makes you think about some stuff that you might not have thought about before or not thought about for a long time, and open up some conversations with the people in your life. So, we will leave you with our love. We hope you have an amazing week wherever you are in the world. And thank you for listening. See you next time.
Goodbye.